All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to our foundation study. I am excited for whoever's going to be on here tonight because I think what we're talking about tonight is so critical. We're talking about building our foundation, about building a biblical worldview or a Christian worldview. And because our worldview it impacts everything about how we go through life and navigate, and we've got all these different competing worldviews, and you see that really playing out, country to country, but then in the subcultures within a country, and why we act and react to things in the way that we do. And so this is so critical. And this piece that we're talking about tonight is really, we're talking about creation. We're talking about the origin of life. Like, where did we come from? How did we get here? And what's the impact of that? And that really is because ideas have consequences. And I am no expert, and I am not going to be able to prove to you, creation by God tonight. I am not going to be able to disprove evolution. We're going to talk about those things. And of course, I have my biases, and we'll talk about that too. But what we believe about things really does. Our ideas have consequences. And so that's what I really feel like this is so important because when we talk about where we're coming from, it impacts our everyday life and it impacts our culture. And I look at it when I've always thought this, when you look at our culture, and like, let's say what we're teaching kids, what right or wrong, what true or not, when we go and we take God out of culture, we take God out of schools, and we tell kids, you are the product of blind chance. You are the product, you're a biological accident. There's no loving and personal God behind your existence, no loving and personal God that cares about you. You are just here by utter and chance. You're just a big, giant accident. In fact, you're just like any other animal. You might be a more highly evolved animal, whatever that means, but you're an animal. And so what's going to happen to kids who are hearing that message, the result is, true or not, is that they're going to start acting like animals. And that's because that's what we're telling them. And so that's the logical consequence of that. And so what we believe about God, what we believe about the Bible, God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, creation, all these things goes at the foundation of who we are. And it impacts how we interact with our world and how we feel about ourselves. And that's one of the things we're going to look at this evening is, what we believe about these things that impacts our self-worth. What do you feel about yourself? Who are you? What do you feel about others? What kind of value do you put on other people? And then ultimately, how do you feel about God? When you think about your self-worth, you can answer this question, or do you look at yourself as a personal creation of a loving God, or do you look at yourself as a result of random chemical reactions in a primordial soup? Those are two very different, starting points and about how we feel about ourselves. And that also goes into your relationship with others, about what we believe about where we came from. There's an example here in our study from the show Home Improvement, which a lot of you guys love. It's a funny show. But there's a story or a scene where, I'm trying to remember their names. Tim and Jill are at a restaurant, and a beautiful woman walks by, and Tim's eyes are averted or taken by her. He watched her, and Jill sees that, and it's upsetting to her that Tim is looking at this other woman. And so she's frustrated, so she, of course, goes to Wise Wilson, who's below the fence line there, and you just see the top of his head, and she's talking to him. And Wilson's advice to her is essentially that going back to caveman times, that cavemen needed to mate with many women in order to propagate the species. So it's just natural that men would have these feelings and desires to do that for others, and that he's just acting on, what he can't help, that kind of thing. So that's one way to look at it. Or you could look at it from a more biblical or Christian worldview that tells us, hey, God made Adam and Eve, and he put them together, and there's this oneness factor in marriage, and that we weren't meant to be mating and propagating all over the place, kind of thing. And that's a big difference in how we view one another and how it affects our relationships and how we value one another. So these ideas, again, have consequences, and they have a consequence on how, our view of God. If there is no God, then obviously we're not going to have thoughts of God, and you're not going to believe that he cares about you or that he has a plan for your life or they have purpose or significance. So you're going to feel farther and farther away from this concept of God and having any identity and meaning in that. So what we're going to look at tonight, we're going to answer three basic questions. They're simple questions, but the answers are by no means simple. And I, again, no expert, and I'm not going to be able to solve any problems for anybody, but we've got to make a choice about, what is going to be the foundation of our lives. And so we're going to talk about, the three questions are, why did God create? And again, these assume a God. So why did God create? How did he create? And when did he create? Or you can just throw God out of the equation and go, when did creation happen? How did it happen? And when did it happen? So why did God create? How and when did God create? So on your outline, why did God create and I'm going to cruise through some things and I'll slow down at others. God created, number one, for his own sake. He did it for his pleasure, for his joy. God decided to do something. Psalm 104:31 says, "May the glory of the Lord last forever. The Lord rejoices in all he had made." He rejoices. He delights in his creation. I love Colossians 1:16. It says, "All things were created by him and for him." God created all of these things for himself, he loves his creation. He created them for himself, out of his love, out of his desire. And he wants, just like he wants to enjoy, what he's created. And it's essentially, or especially you and me, that we are the crown of his creation. The reason that he made all this stuff to enjoy. Just like we enjoy making things, you take pleasure in creating things. That's a part of a lot of who we are. I take pleasure in making things. I'm not super creative with my hands, but one of the things that I enjoy making is food. It doesn't last very long, but I enjoy making it simply just because it brings me pleasure. And so God created, for himself and out of his pleasure. Number two, God created to express his sovereignty. We've talked about this concept of sovereignty with the character and nature of God the Father, and that sovereignty ultimately means that God is in charge, that he's in control, and that he has everything under his power. Psalm 89:11 says, "The heavens are yours, and yours also is the earth. You founded the world and all that is in it." And then Psalm 24:11, "The earth is or 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." It's the Lord's. It belongs to him. He's in control. He's got it in his hands. And that includes everything in the created order from far away right down to you and me. We belong to him. So God is sovereign. Number three, God created to reflect his character. Or in other words, we see his character reflected in the created order. Psalm 19:1 and 2. "The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge." The heavens declare the glory of God. Romans 1:20, and I know I'm hitting you with a lot of scripture. It's in your outline. It says, "From the time the world was created, people have seen the earth and the sky and all that God has made. They can clearly see his invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, so they have no excuse whatsoever for not knowing God." The writers here in Scripture are just saying, you can see God in the created order. You look at it, you go, hey, there's something behind all of this, and you can see his character. It's being reflected in there. Excuse me. An illustration, of a pottery class. Like you have all these people taking a pottery class, and the clay's lumped there before them, and the teacher says, go, make your pot, do whatever you want. You're going to see different types of people and their characteristics and their qualities reflected in what they made. Some people are going to, make it very intricate. It's going to be a lot of detail. Other people, it's just going to be smooth, or it's going to be rough. And there's not going to be a lot of detail. Some people are going to just be like, well, how fast can I make this thing? Can I beat everybody else? Can I get done first? And that reflects a little bit of their quality. Some people are going to like, well, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to be slow. I'm going to do it very meticulously. And that's a reflection on them. And then you have other people in the room, the class clowns who are just going to be playing with the clay and throwing it at one another because that's a little bit of who they are, So how we do things reflects our character. And so the creation reflects who God is. And in that, and when we study creation and we see it, we can learn so much about God. So again, number 4 is, why did God create? God created to show his wisdom. Psalm 104:24 says, "Lord, you have made many things. With your wisdom you made them. The earth is full of your riches." Proverbs 3:19, "By wisdom the Lord laid the earth's foundations. By understanding he set the heavens in place." So with the created order, the Bible is telling us you look into it, you study it, you discover, you see God's character, but in that you see his wisdom. You see the intricacies. You see, just how much wisdom, how much knowledge, how much understanding, and how expressive God is. I mean, he is so much, and you see his wisdom in all of that. So that's what creation is there for. And that's a little bit about why he did that. So now we move on to how did he do it? How did creation happen? One answer to that, the easy answer is, from a Christian standpoint, is Genesis 1:3. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God said it, and it happened. Boom. That's great. Move on, right? But we want to get a little bit more into the nitty gritty, and so we want to look at the three major views of how things came into being. And one of them is the supernatural creation, which I'll hit at the end. But the other two, and they're not necessarily biblical, but we want to look at them at least briefly. One is evolution, and then there's theistic evolution, and then there's, of course, supernatural creation. So let's look really quickly at evolution. And again, I'm not going to dispel evolution as a science, and just disprove it in some way tonight. That's impossible. But evolution ultimately is not a view of creation. It's a view ultimately of an accident, because it puts God out. It puts the idea of a creator out. It's the idea that life evolved, through natural processes, starting with like a single cell, and then over time, billions and billions of years, all these things happened and came into being ultimately as largely an accident. And that's kind of the prevailing viewpoint in culture, at least our culture today. And most people think that science has somehow proven that evolution is true, and the reality is it has not. And while it may be the prevailing view among scientists, and we'll talk about why that might be a little bit, it is important to note, and this is in your notes, that it is impossible to prove scientifically any theory of origins. This is because the scientific method is based on observation and experimentation, and it is impossible to make observations or to conduct experiments on the origins of the universe. In other words, we can't go back in time. We can't see. All of these are theories or best guesses. We cannot recreate that in a laboratory, and so we're not going to be able to prove that it's true. We simply cannot do that. We are going to have to look at the evidence based on, all of, we have to look at the evidence that's available and make some decisions. But all of that, again, it can't be proven. It's going to be a matter of faith to a degree. And the reality is, when it comes to these things, sometimes we think that people are being objective, that scientists, are being objective. Maybe if you have a leaning towards science and evolution, the scientists, they're just being objective. They're just being, that's innate to their, character or something. And maybe somebody like me, I'm just being biased because I believe in God, and so I'm being subjective. And that's just not true. The reality is that we are all subjective. There is no objectivity. We are all bent by our beliefs and our experiences and our ideas and these preconceived notions. And as much as we want to dispel them, every one of us is going to be impacted by them. I remember taking a journalism class in college. It was a class I probably liked, one of the least liked classes in college. I did not like the professor, but I remember this class more than any other, because that guy, I can't remember his name, but he drove me crazy, and I could tell you stories. But I learned some really good life lessons through that guy, and that's probably why he did it, and probably what made him a good teacher, and I thought he was one of my worst. But he would say in our journalism class, like if we were writing these articles, like, you want to be objective. You don't want to, let your biases and opinions and everything affect what you're writing. You're just writing the news. And wouldn't that be great? And isn't that what we would hope for out of our news these days? But I remember being in that class going, you got to be kidding me. Nobody can be objective. All of us are going to be tainted in our writing and our reporting of everything with our ideas and views, that you just cannot be completely and utterly objective. We are all going to be subjective in some way. And you look at our culture today, and you look at where our news media is today, there's no objectivity out there. It's completely subjective, and everybody's bringing their ideas and preconceived notions and opinions, and so that's across the board. And so it's very hard, we've got to just realize that with all of these, there is no objectivity, and that we're going to have to just do our best to weed through all of this and figure it out. So here's some of the problems, though, with evolution. as a theory. And again, I'm not going to dispel evolution tonight, but here's number one is evolution leaves God out. God is left out of creation. Evolution ultimately pictures God either A, as non-existent or cold and distant and completely out of the process of how really things came to be. And when you do that, when you say that, those ideas are going to have consequences. You say there is no God, well, then all of a sudden you've also taken away your grounds for any really morals become relative. There is no true moral values. It's all relative and that kind of thing. And that impacts, obviously your view of God. You don't think there's a God. You don't think that you maybe matter or that you have any purpose or meaning or value, or at least it takes away from what could be your value if there was a God. And so so what happens with that is in this, like, evolution leaves God out of the creation process or where things came from. Some people like to try to help it, a lot of well-meaning Christians. And so when we'll talk about theistic evolution here in just a second, but we think that, hey, let's just put God into the equation, that God, maybe there is a God and that he created through the process of evolution, and we'll try to mix the two because, we're trying to make everybody happy here, but that's not really possible. We'll look at that. But even Darwin, the guy that started this whole thing off, he rejected the idea of God being in part of this evolutionary process. He said it this way. He said, "I will give absolutely nothing for the theory of natural selection if it requires miraculous additions at any one stage of descent." In other words, I'm not counting on God entering in and being a part of this. He's not a part of the evolutionary process. So the evolution jettisons God altogether. Ultimately. Number two, the probability of evolution by chance, and because that's what they're telling us, is that we're just the product of chance and accident going along the way. But what are the chances that all of these things happened, these chemical reactions and all really happened, and this has all evolved over all this time? The guy named Francis Crick, he's said to be the co-discoverer of the molecular structure of DNA. And he was talking about the possibility by chance of one little chain of amino acids, within our DNA combining, by chance, by accident. And I'm not even going to begin to understand everything I'm about to read to you. So just hang on here. It says, this is what Crick says. He says, "This is an easy exercise in combinatorials." I hope I said that right. Suppose the chain is about 200 amino acids long. This is, if anything, rather less than the average length of proteins of all types. So he's just giving you a short number here. Since we have just 20 possibilities at each place, the number of possibilities is 20 multiplied by itself some 200 times. This is conveniently written as 20 to the 200th power. That is a 1 followed by 260 zeros. This number is quite beyond our everyday comprehension. For comparison, consider the number of fundamental particles, atoms, speaking loosely, in the entire visible universe, not just in our own galaxy with its 10 to the 11th power stars, but in all the billions of galaxies out to the limits of observable space. This number, which is estimated to be 10 to the 80th power, is quite paltry compared to the 10 to the 200 number that we brought up before. Moreover, we only have considered a polypeptide chain of a rather modest length, that's 200. Had we considered longer ones as well, the figure would have been even more immense. So what he's trying to say is the possibility of this first step of evolution happening by chance is a statistical impossibility. The numbers are just too immense for it to have happened, in that way. And so one guy summed it up this way: it requires an incredible amount of faith to believe that evolution could have caused by chance all life that ever did or does now exist. And so that's what we're getting back to, is all of these ideas about creation are ultimately faith proposals. We're looking at evidence and coming at it from our different biases and everything, but we cannot prove it all. And it takes a great deal, like this guy said, it's an incredible amount of faith to say, hey, that this thing happened by chance, 10 to the 200th power, and that's not even getting to the full length of it. And so it's just not like, the likelihood is just so immeasurable. But the reality is something is here, and we got to try to figure out where it came from. And so another problem with evolution, number 3, is a lack of evidence for species to species evolution. In other words, that you started with something small and it moved, but it ultimately changed and became, from one species to another. And there's just no evidence for that. And even Charles Darwin conceded that point when he said, quote, "Not one change of species into another one is on record. We cannot prove that a single species has been changed." Is that he was assuming that we would find that at some point, but it hasn't. In fact, since the time that this all came into being, things have actually gone backwards in that. The things that they thought were leading in that direction and seeing species to species change have been disproven and put out, and that you just don't see one type of animal changing into another. You see different, kind of subgroups within, like new breeds within a set of animals, but you don't see that animal breed changing into another species altogether. And so we just don't have evidence of that at all. Number 4 is this idea called the irreducible complexity of living things. And this, I'm not going to get in too deep. I'm going to go real quick on this, but it's essentially this idea that when you look at the created order and the complexity of so much of it, there are systems within our created order that they're so, within that system, there's parts that so depend on the other parts for any of it to make sense at all or to work and function. And evolution over a period of time and time changing doesn't account for, like that these things would come together because the parts are interdependent and they can't they're not just all of a sudden going to come on at time. They need time one by one to come into place. And there's too many systems that are too complex for that ultimately to happen. Now, I can't, prove that at all myself, but there's hundreds of examples out there. And of course, people will try to debate that as well. But it's part of the weakness of the evolutionary idea. So then jumping, from evolution, well, maybe, let's say maybe it is true, but there's theistic evolution that God, jumped in on it, and that's how, we kind of solved the problem between faith and science, is that God, was part of the evolutionary process. And again, that's an easy way to solve it and say, hey, everybody's right, the God people and the non-God people, and, that's just how God did it, and God wonderful. But that creates a lot of problems when you start saying, hey, God created by evolution, or evolution is true, but also God at the same time. Some problems with that. Number 1 on your outline, the Bible pictures God as being intimately and actively involved in each aspect of the moment of creation. When you look at the story of the Bible and where we get our ideas from, hey, how did God make things? He's involved in creation. He's not just, hey, you starting things off and then letting things go and just seeing what happens. Psalm 19:1 again, the heavens tell the glory of God. The skies announce what his hands have made. I love Nehemiah 9:6 here. He says, you alone are the Lord. You made the heavens, even the highest heavens, and all their starry hosts, the earth and all that is on it, the seas and all that is in them. You give life to everything, and the multitudes of heaven worship you. In Psalm 33:6 and 9, by the word of the Lord were the heavens made, their starry host by the breath of his mouth. For he spoke, and it came to be. He commanded, and it stood firm. As you read these verses, what you see there is the idea of a God who is very present in creation and in what happened, and it's very different than what you see explained in the evolutionary process and the theistic evolution, which would say God just kind of started things and then just let it go and let's just see what happens. I want to read you another quote here from a guy named Greg Koukl. I don't know, Koukl. I don't know how to say that last name. But he's really addressing the problem that comes with theistic evolution. And he says it this way. He says, the problem with any form of theistic evolution is that it means design by chance. That's like a square circle. There is no such thing. Blending evolution with creation is like putting a square peg in a round hole. It just doesn't fit. That evolution says there is no creator, there is no creation, there is no designer, yet we see design in everything, and God would be a designer and is trying to put them together, and they just don't fit together. Evolution in and of itself presupposes or supposes that there is no God. There's no room for him in the equation. And so theistic evolution is just really not going to mesh there. So that's a problem. Number two problem there, the theistic evolution, it is a poetical or a poetic rather than historical view of Genesis 1 through 11. These first 11 chapters of Genesis of the Bible are so critical, as we're going to see, to all of Christianity and how you read them. And if you take a theistic evolution view, you really do have to view them not as historical, but really just as poetical. And one of the point here is that the way that you read those is going to impact how you read the rest of the Bible, the rest of the book. You know, you pick up a book and you start reading it, you don't know what it is, and all of a sudden you realize it's a murder mystery. You go, okay, this is a fictional account, so that's going to impact how you read the rest of the book. You pick up a book and all of a sudden you're seeing recipes, you go, okay, no, this isn't a mystery, this is a cookbook, and that's going to impact how you read the rest of the book. The same is true when you're looking at the Bible. It's so important what we believe because it's going about, especially the beginnings of the Bible and where things got started, because that's going to, it impacts, and we're going to see that as we get through this, how the rest of the Bible plays out. So there's a battle for Genesis, and a guy named Ray Boylan said this. He said, we must realize that the book of Genesis is the foundation of the entire Bible. The word Genesis means beginnings. Genesis tells the story of the beginning of the universe, solar system, earth, life, man, sin, Israel, nations, and salvation. An understanding of Genesis is crucial to our understanding of the rest of Scripture. For example, Genesis chapters 1 through 11 are quoted or referred to more than 100 times in the New Testament alone. And it is over these chapters that the primary battle for the historicity of Genesis rages. All of the first 11 chapters are referred to in the New Testament. Every New Testament author refers somewhere to Genesis 1 through 11. And so all of the rest of Scripture is dependent on what we see there. And so how we see those verses and what they mean impact everything that follows. And so it's pretty critical, and we're going to see that again coming up here. We're going to see even more on that. But the third kind of weakness of the theistic evolution, and this isn't my favorite point, but I'll share it and then tell you why I do like it. It's placing God's creation and God's word on equal footings as revelations of God. Now, this is coming from our study that, I didn't write all this up. I don't know how it's exactly doing that, putting God's creation on equal footing with God's word. But we should see that God's word is so different than God's creation. God's creation does tell us about God. It tells us a lot about God, but it doesn't tell us to the degree that God's revealed word does. So look at these verses. This is important for me. Isaiah 48, the grass withers and the flowers fall, but the word of our God stands forever. In Psalm 24:35, Jesus says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. The created order tells us is not going to last forever. Those things are going to pass away, but God's word is going to last forever. And it just shows us the priority and the importance that we need to place on Scripture in our lives. So I won't hang out there any longer, and then we'll jump to, so we said there's three primary, explanations of origins or creation, evolution, theistic evolution, and now the last one, supernatural creation. That there's supernatural creation. That, in other words, there's a God. He's personal, and in Genesis 1 through 11, we read about that, and He spoke things into being. And so I'm not going to go deep here, but I'll kind of get to it like this. It's the idea that William Paley, he put forward this idea called the watchmaker theory. And this is my rendition of it, essentially. It's like if you're walking down the beach and you see a watch that's there laying on the shore, you wouldn't pick up that watch and look at the intricacies of all the design and everything that went into it and say, there was some parts out in the ocean and they just bounced around and banged into each other and over this period of time popped together and made a functioning watch that worked. No, that watch was made by somebody. It had a designer that put it together, and that's the reason that it's got the beauty and the intricacies and the ability to function as it does. And so that's what, when you look at the created order, or, you look at Earth, you look at the universe, you look at, our galaxy, you look at all these things and how they work together. And there's just evidence that, hey, this is just too much to be an accident. This doesn't make any sense. And so it's the idea that there's got to be a creator behind all of this. Can I prove that? Can I, prove that to you here? No, I can't. But that's the thing about all of these theories, whether it's evolution, theistic evolution, or supernatural creation, they all are ultimately going to come down to an issue of faith. We've got to look at the evidence and decide how did all of this come into being. It's going to take faith for each and every one. One last quote before we move on to the last section. A guy named Robert Jastrow, founder of NASA's Goddard Institute for Space Studies, he wrote this. He said, "A sound explanation may exist for the explosive birth of our universe. But if it does, science cannot find out what the explanation is. The scientist's pursuit of the past ends in the moment of creation. This is an exceedingly strange development, unexpected by all but the theologians. They have always accepted the word of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak, and as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." So he's painting this picture of, like science can maybe go back to the point, and say, hey, we think this is what happened, but we don't know for sure. And then what happened before that, we have no idea. There's no explanation for that. And he's painting this picture of this guy, this scientist, and he's scaling the mountains of ignorance and getting to knowledge. And he's going to find that the theologians have already been there. So, from how did God create to when did God create? And and our view of how he created is going to impact, when did God bring everything into existence? Number one on your outline is, when did God create? Is all evolutionists believe that the earth is billions of years old. And they have good reason for that. And we'll talk briefly about that in a second. But on the other hand, number two, creationists are divided, that most believe in a young earth, but there are some who believe it is an old planet. And so depending on where you lie and everything, there's some that believe the earth is not that old, even to thousands of years, and others that are going to look at the millions and billions of years as well. Obviously from a supernatural creation standpoint, if you believe, take literally and historically what's happening in Genesis, could God create everything in 6 days? Well, if he's God, of course, he could do it in a second if he wanted to, but this is how it's pictured there. But that's fine. But on the other hand, when you look at the created order and you start studying, there is seemingly a huge mass of evidence that points to the earth being very, very old, and that the universe is very old. One of the things that I look to, and I, what's the explanation for this, is like there are stars that are just so far away from where we are, that even at the speed of light, it would take them, I don't know the math, millions, billions of years to reach our planet. So we're looking up at the heavens at night and we see the stars, and that light took so many years to get here, because light can only travel but so fast, and these stars are so far away. And so they would look, a scientist would look at that and go, well, there's explanation, like that star is so far away, we wouldn't be able to see it had there not been this amount of time for that light to travel to get here. We wouldn't even know that it's there, but it has had that time to travel here, and boom, we're seeing its light now. The answer to that, for me, and I get that. That's a credible argument. But could God have created things and put the stars in place, and in a moment he's like, okay, I'm going to just bring the light down, boom, and it's there, and it doesn't need the millions and billions of years from that distance to get here. Just like, when God, if God created Adam and Eve, the Bible doesn't say he created them as a little, little baby in the womb, as a little tiny, whatever it's called. He created Adam as an adult. He created him with the appearance of age. He wasn't a child. He wasn't an infant. He wasn't in the womb. He wasn't, just, what, again, I can't remember what it's called. But he is an adult, so God created Adam and Eve as adults so he can create stars and boom, their light is here. But there is a ton of evidence for, an older, universe. And so how do we deal with that? Now, some Christians deal with it, based on Genesis 1 through 11. And again, that's the important arena for us. When it talks about the day, and the Hebrew word for day is yom, and it says, God created and on day one, yom, and it was good, and so he did these things. And what does the word yom mean when he says it was a day? And so there's three different ways it could be understood. These are on your outline. Number one, the most common way that the word yom is used in the Bible, in the Old Testament, is a 24-hour day. It's, sun up to sundown kind of thing. Number two is an unspecified period of time. I really go back. It's sun up to sun up, not sun up to sundown, 24 hours. But number two is that yom is used as an unspecified period of time, and so it could be more than 24 hours. And then three, it was used as an era, and that's another more unspecified time. And so a lot of people look at that and go, well, maybe when God said, day one, that wasn't 24 hours, it was 1,000 years or 1,000,000 years or 1,000,000,000 years. That's one way to look at it. But most uses in the Old Testament of the word yom are going to be the 24-hour period. But there's room for, okay, let's have a discussion about what that could mean. But let's talk about, though, like, the consequences. Like, let's just say, you're trying to go the direction of, man, this thing took millions and billions of years, and that's how long God took for all these things to happen. But the really thing is, there's a really important theological question about the timing of all of this. And here's the question, and we're going to end with this, is the major theological question concerning when God created is, when did sin and death enter the world? Because the Bible tells us in Genesis 1 through 11 about the creation, but it also tells us about sin, and it tells us about death. And so since it tells us that, the Bible tells us, and this is in your notes, that it was Adam's personal choice to sin that brought death and the fall of creation. So Romans 5:12 says it this way: when Adam sinned, sin entered the entire human race. Adam's sin brought death, so death spread to everyone, for everyone's sin. And so the Bible tells us that God created Adam, and then Adam sinned, and then death came in. Then that sin and death went into all of creation, infected everywhere. And so since that's true, that the salvation that Jesus brings to us is tied in the New Testament to the historical fact of Adam's sin. 1 Corinthians 15:21 and 22. For since death came through one man, the resurrection of the dead comes also through a man. For as in Adam all die, so in Christ all will be made alive. Therefore, any idea of creation that theorizes the death of human beings and the fall of creation before the sin of Adam and Eve is contrary to the clear teachings of God's Word. So all that summarized to say, if everything is dependent on, like all of the New Testament, everything that Jesus did is dependent on the reality of what happened with Adam and Eve. And if we're looking at that as something that happened over millions and billions of years, and we had life and death and decay and destruction way before sin entered in, and what happened with Adam and Eve, then that's contradictory to what we're seeing in the Old Testament, and then what's played out in the New Testament as a result of that. And that's huge, because here's this atheist guy who understands this completely. His name is G. Richard Bozarth. He writes this. He said, Christianity has fought and still fights and will fight science to the desperate end over evolution, because evolution destroys utterly and finally the very reason Jesus' earthly life was supposedly made necessary. He says, destroy Adam and Eve and the original sin, and in the rubble you will find the sorry remains of the Son of God. If Jesus was not the Redeemer that died for our sins, and this is what evolution means, then Christianity is nothing. So here's this atheist guy who believes in evolution, and he understands that if evolution is true, then there's no way what happened in Genesis is true, and then that totally makes Jesus unnecessary. and that there's no reason for us to believe in him. And there really is no sin or no morals and no values and everything else is a wash. That's why it is so important. Everything that we believe about creation as a foundation for our worldview is going to impact the way that we live out our lives. And so if we, truth is truth, if evolution is true, then we need to embrace that. But ultimately, we can't prove the truth. And so we're going to have to look at the evidence, and every one of those things is going to come down to faith. Am I going to believe in evolution, theistic evolution, or supernatural creation? And what I believe about those things will have consequences in my life. Now, I can still be a good evolutionist and be a good person, quote unquote good, whatever that means, if you believe in evolution. But at the end of the day, I start teaching that in my schools and in my culture, it's going to play itself out in terms of the way people are going to start treating each other and how they value themselves, how they value others, and what they think about God. And that's going to lead down a road that you and I really don't want to go to, which I really believe is what's happening in culture today. And so we've got to take a hard look at that, and we've got to firm up our foundation. So I want to challenge you. I know I can't answer all the questions. We're biting off way more than we really can chew here. But you need to explore, read opposing accounts, read people that don't think like you and me. And even if you're an evolutionist, read people that don't think like you, and think about the consequences of your beliefs. And for those of us who are believers, I would say, again, explore, read, get out in creation, enjoy creation, find God out there and get in his word and read it. And above all, witness, because we live in a world that is broken and sinful. It's sin sick, and it doesn't believe in God. God has been jettisoned from our culture. People are desperate and hurting, and they need a Savior, and they need a rescue. And that's why it's so imperative for us as individuals, us as a church, to go out and share Christ and to share the gospel and to turn the church inside out and get out of our buildings, get out of our homes, and get into our communities and sharing Christ's love with people. Because there's no political solution, there's no scientific solution. We need to show the love of God for people. God is the only one that can change our hearts. So let's trust in him. I'll pray and we'll close. God, thank you for making us. Thank you for making me. God, I know this lesson is it's hard, it's deep, and we need to go even deeper still, God. And I just pray that we would. God, thank you for the beauty that we see in the creation all around us. God, thank you how we see your handiwork, we see your character, we see your wisdom, we see your sovereignty. We see all of that all around us, God. And help us to enjoy it, God, and just to see you and experience you and just love you more because of our world. But God, we also see the brokenness of sin in our world. And we see the hate, and we see the evil. And God, we just are brokenhearted for it. And we see families torn apart, and we see lives, this young people going around with no hope and no purpose. God, burden us to be witnesses for you. Thank you for redeeming us through Jesus. Thank you that the gospel is there and that we can have hope. And it's in his name we pray. Amen. All right, I appreciate you guys putting up with me and listening to this. And I look forward to going deeper maybe with you guys sometime when we can get back together and bat some ideas around. So see you next time. Thanks.